The autumn wind carried the scent of coming snow across Jake Morrison's ranch as he made his final rounds before bed. His boots crunched on frost-covered ground as he approached the stable, lantern swinging gently in his weathered hand. At 35, Jake had grown accustomed to the solitude of his remote homestead, but tonight something felt different. His horses were unusually quiet, no nickering or shifting in their stalls. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Your comment helps our community grow stronger. Thanks, and let's get back to the story. Jake pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside, raising his lantern high. The warm scent of hay and leather filled his nostrils. But there was something else, something that made his pulse quicken. In the far corner of the stable, curled up against a pile of fresh straw, lay a young woman. Her dark hair was matted with blood, her dress torn and dirty. She was barely breathing. Jake's gentle mare, Buttercup, stood protectively near the woman, as if she had been keeping watch. The other horses remained calm, which told Jake everything he needed to know about this stranger's character. Animals could sense things humans missed, and his horses had accepted her presence completely. He knelt beside the unconscious woman, setting his lantern carefully in the straw. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with delicate features marred by fresh bruises. Her left eye was swollen shut, and dried blood crusted her split lip. Whoever had done this to her had shown no mercy. Jake had seen enough violence in his younger days as a deputy sheriff to recognize the signs of a brutal beating. This woman had been hurt badly, and recently. She wore no wedding ring, but that didn't mean much on the frontier where jewelry was often the first thing sold in hard times. Very gently, Jake touched her shoulder. She stirred slightly, letting out a soft whimper that tore at his heart. Her good eye fluttered open, wide with terror when she saw him looming over her with the lantern. "Don't be afraid," Jake said softly, the way he spoke to spooked horses. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Jake Morrison, and this is my ranch. You're safe here." The woman tried to sit up but winced in pain, clutching her ribs. Jake could see she was struggling to focus, probably suffering from a head injury along with everything else. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't send me back. I can't go back there." Jake felt a surge of protective anger. "Nobody's sending you anywhere," he assured her. "Can you tell me your name?" "Sarah," she managed to say before her eyes closed again. She had used the last of her strength just to speak. Jake carefully lifted Sarah in his arms, surprised by how light she was. She had been running on empty for who knows how long. He carried her to his ranch house, settling her on his own bed while he prepared a makeshift examination area in the kitchen. Living alone for the past 10 years since his parents died, Jake had learned basic medical care out of necessity. He heated water on the stove and gathered clean cloths, trying to assess how seriously Sarah was injured without causing her more pain. When she regained consciousness an hour later, Jake was sitting beside the bed with a bowl of warm broth. The fear in her eyes hadn't diminished, but she seemed to understand he meant no harm. "You need to eat something," Jake said gently. "Then we should clean those wounds properly." Sarah struggled to sit up, accepting the spoon with trembling hands. As she sipped the broth, Jake noticed the way she flinched whenever he moved too quickly. Someone had taught her to expect violence from men. "How long were you in my stable?" Jake asked. "I don't know," Sarah replied. "Maybe 2 days. Your horses, they didn't mind me being there. They kept me warm." Jake nodded. Horses are good judges of character. They wouldn't have let you stay if you meant any harm. As the night wore on, Sarah's story emerged in fragments. She had been working as a seamstress in the town of Cedar Falls, 30 miles east. Her employer, a wealthy merchant named Crawford, had been making unwelcome advances for months. When she refused him, he accused her of stealing and convinced the sheriff she was a thief. Rather than face a corrupt trial, Sarah had run. But Crawford wasn't content to let her go. He sent his men after her, tracking her for days across the wilderness. They caught up with her just outside Jake's property line, and the beating they gave her was meant to be a lesson about defying important men. "I thought I was going to die," Sarah whispered, "but somehow I made it to your stable. The horses, they seemed to know I needed help." Jake felt his jaw clench with anger. He had dealt with men like Crawford before, bullies who used their money and influence to hurt those weaker than themselves. But Sarah was under his protection now, and Jake Morrison took his responsibilities seriously. The problem was, Crawford's influence extended beyond Cedar Falls. As a merchant, he had connections with law enforcement across the territory. If he wanted Sarah back, He could probably make legal trouble for anyone harboring her. Jake spent the rest of the night considering his options while Sarah slept fitfully. By morning, he had reached a decision that surprised even him. Sarah woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. Jake had prepared a proper breakfast, the first real meal she had eaten in over a week. As she ate, he outlined his plan. "Crawford is going to keep coming after you," Jake explained. "He's got the law on his side, at least the corrupt parts of it. But there's one thing that would stop him completely." Sarah looked up from her plate, waiting. "If you were married, you'd be under your husband's legal protection. Crawford couldn't touch you then, not without facing a husband's right to defend his wife." Sarah stared at him. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we get married," Jake said simply. "Today, if possible. It would be a marriage of protection, nothing more. You'd have your own room, your own space. I'm not asking for anything except the right to keep you safe." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying Jake's weathered face. She had learned to read men quickly, a survival skill that had served her well. What she saw in Jake Morrison was genuine kindness, a rare quality in her experience. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked. "Because it's the right thing to do," Jake replied. "And because I've been alone long enough to know the value of good company, even if it's just someone to share meals with." Before Sarah could respond, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Jake moved to the window and cursed under his breath. For men were riding up to his house, and he recognized the type immediately. Hired muscle, the kind of men who enjoyed their work a little too much. Jake grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace. "Sarah, go to the back room and stay quiet. These are Crawford's men." The lead rider was a lean man with cold eyes and a deputy's badge that probably wasn't legitimate. He dismounted and approached the porch with the confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating people. "We're looking for a woman," the man called out. "Dark hair, about 20. Goes by the name Sarah. We have reason to believe she's a thief, and we're authorized to bring her back to Cedar Falls for trial." Jake stepped onto his porch, rifle held casually but ready. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description. This is private property, gentlemen. You're welcome to state your business and move on." The deputy smiled without warmth. "Now, Mr. Morrison, we know she's here. We tracked her to your stable. Just hand her over and there won't be any trouble." "Like I said," Jake replied evenly, "I haven't seen anyone. And even if I had, I wouldn't hand over a scared woman to a bunch of armed strangers. Especially not ones who look like they enjoy hurting people." The deputy's hand moved toward his gun, but Jake was faster, bringing his rifle to bear. The other three men tensed, but none of them were eager to face a determined man with a good position and clear fields of fire. "You're making a mistake, Morrison," the deputy warned. "Crawford has influence all over this territory. Cross him and you'll regret it." "Maybe," Jake said, "but you're on my land, threatening me and mine. That's a mistake I won't tolerate." The standoff lasted several minutes before the deputy decided discretion was the better part of valor. They mounted up and rode away, but Jake knew they would be back with more men and probably a legitimate warrant. Sarah emerged from hiding, pale but determined. "They'll come back, won't they?" Jake nodded. "With more men and legal papers, real or fake. We don't have much time." "Then let's do it," Sarah said firmly. "Let's get married." Jake hitched up his wagon, and they rode to town as fast as the horses could manage. Reverend Michaels was surprised to see them at his door at 11 in the morning, but Jake's urgency convinced him this was serious business. The ceremony was simple and swift, witnessed by the Reverend's wife and the town's elderly clerk. Sarah wore her torn dress, still bearing the stains of her ordeal, while Jake stood beside her in his work clothes. They spoke the traditional vows, but both understood this was primarily a legal contract for protection. When Reverend Michaels pronounced them husband and wife, Jake gently squeezed Sarah's hand. She squeezed back, and for the first time since he found her, she smiled. They returned to the ranch to find Crawford's men waiting, this time with a territorial marshal who looked uncomfortable with his companions. The deputy from the morning wore a satisfied smirk. "Marshal Henderson," Jake greeted the lawman politely. "What brings you to my ranch?" "We have a warrant for the arrest of Sarah Whitmore," the marshal said, holding up official-looking papers. "She's wanted for theft in Cedar Falls." Jake took the papers and examined them carefully. "These are for Sarah Whitmore," he said finally. "But there's no Sarah Whitmore here." The deputy snarled. "Don't play games, Morrison. We know she's here." Jake pulled out the marriage certificate, still fresh from the clerk's desk. "The only Sarah here is Sarah Morrison, my wife. And as her husband, I have the legal right to protect her from harassment. The marshal examined the certificate, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. This appears to be legitimate, he said slowly. If this woman is now Mrs. Morrison, and if she committed any crimes before her marriage, that's a matter for the territorial courts, not a local merchant's complaints. The deputy looked furious. Crawford isn't going to stand for this. Crawford can stand for whatever he likes, Jake replied calmly. But Sarah is my wife now, under the protection of my name and my home. Any man who threatens her threatens me. The marshal handed back the papers. I'm sorry for the disturbance, Mr. Morrison. Mrs. Morrison. The warrant appears to be invalidated by the change in circumstances. After the lawman left, Jake and Sarah stood in awkward silence on their porch. The reality of what they had done was beginning to sink in. I want you to know, Jake said carefully, that nothing has to change between us. This marriage is for your protection, nothing more. You have my word as a gentleman. Sarah looked at him with something approaching wonder. In the space of 24 hours, this man had saved her life, offered her protection, and married her without asking for anything in return. It was so different from every other interaction she had ever had with men that she hardly knew how to respond. Thank you, she said simply. I don't know how I'll ever repay this kindness. Jake smiled. Just help me figure out how two strangers can share a house without driving each other crazy. Over the following weeks, Jake and Sarah developed a routine that worked for both of them. Sarah proved to be an excellent cook and took over the household tasks that Jake had always struggled with. In return, Jake taught her about ranch life, how to care for the horses, and basic skills for frontier living. Sarah moved into the spare room Jake had hastily prepared, but they shared meals and evening conversations by the fireplace. Jake was surprised to discover how much he enjoyed having someone to talk to, while Sarah slowly began to relax around the gentle man who had saved her. The horses, especially Buttercup, had fully accepted Sarah as part of the ranch family. She spent hours in the stable, grooming them and talking to them in soft tones. Jake often found her there in the evenings, and he could see how the animal's unconditional acceptance was helping her heal from her trauma. One evening in November, as the first real snow began to fall, Sarah and Jake were sitting by the fire after dinner. Sarah was mending one of Jake's shirts while he carved a new tool handle. The domestic scene felt natural, comfortable in a way that surprised them both. Jake, Sarah said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you never marry before? A man like you, with your own land and a good heart, most women would consider you quite a catch. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. I suppose I never found the right person. After my parents died, I got used to being alone. It seemed easier than risking getting hurt. Sarah nodded, understanding that sentiment completely. What about you? Sarah asked. Did you ever think about marriage before all this happened? I thought about it, Sarah replied. But working for Crawford, I saw how he treated his wife. She was like a possession to him, something he owned. I swore I would never put myself in that position. Jake looked up from his carving. This isn't like that, though, is it? Our arrangement? Sarah met his eyes. No, it's not. You've never made me feel like anything but an equal partner. Even though this started as protection, you've treated me with more respect than any man ever has. As winter deepened, their partnership evolved into something neither had expected. Sarah began to care for Jake's comfort and happiness, while Jake found himself looking forward to her smile at the breakfast table and her gentle voice in the evenings. The transformation was gradual and natural. Sarah's bruises faded, and her confidence returned. She began to laugh at Jake's dry humor and contribute her own stories to their conversations. Jake found himself thinking of Sarah not as the broken woman he had rescued, but as the intelligent, strong person she was becoming. One evening in December, as they worked together to repair a harness, their hands touched while reaching for the same tool. Neither pulled away immediately, and Sarah looked up to find Jake watching her with an expression she had never seen before. Sarah, Jake said softly, I need to tell you something. What is it? This marriage, it may have started as protection, but somewhere along the way, it became real for me. I've come to care for you, not just as someone under my protection, but as a woman I admire and respect. Sarah felt her heart racing. She had been having similar thoughts but hadn't dared voice them. I care for you too, Jake, she whispered. More than I thought possible. Jake cupped her face gently in his work-roughened hands. Would it be all right if I kissed you, Mrs. Morrison? Sarah smiled, the first truly joyful expression Jake had ever seen from her. I think that would be very all right, Mr. Morrison. Their first kiss was gentle and tentative, both of them still learning how to trust in this new feeling between them. But it was also full of promise, the beginning of something beautiful growing from the foundation of respect and kindness they had built together. Spring came early to Jake's ranch, and with it came a letter that would change everything. Crawford had been arrested for fraud and corruption, his business empire crumbling under investigation by territorial authorities. Sarah was completely cleared of all charges, her name restored. But more importantly, Sarah no longer needed Jake's protection. She was free to make her own choices about her future. Jake showed her the letter over breakfast, watching her face carefully. "You're free now," he said quietly. "Free to go anywhere, do anything you want." Sarah set down the letter and looked at the man who had given her back her life. "Where would I go?" she asked. "This is my home now. You're my family. Even if you didn't have to stay, even if this marriage wasn't necessary anymore." Sarah reached across the table and took Jake's hand. "Especially then. Jake Morrison, I choose to stay married to you not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I love you." Jake felt a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying lift from his shoulders. "I love you too, Sarah. More than I ever thought possible." That evening, they renewed their vows in a private ceremony in their own home, with only the horses as witnesses. This time, Sarah wore a beautiful dress she had sewn herself, and Jake wore his best suit. This time, when they kissed as husband and wife, it was with the full knowledge that they were choosing each other freely, completely, and forever. As they stood together on their porch, watching the sun set over their land, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them together. She had come to Jake's stable broken and afraid, seeking only shelter. Instead, she had found healing, love, and a future she had never dared to dream of. Jake put his arm around his wife, still marveling at how perfectly she fit against his side. The lonely cowboy who had found a beaten girl in his stable had discovered something far more precious than he ever imagined. He had found his heart's true home. Thanks for watching this story of unexpected love and second chances. If this tale of frontier romance touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more stories from the American West. What do you think makes the strongest foundation for lasting love? Share your thoughts in the comments below.